Good morning. Welcome to Rising. We have an incredible show for you to kick off the week. Robbie, what do we have?
Well, our Rising panel will be here to weigh in on a possible national abortion ban that Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell has floated. And then Emily Jashinsky will discuss why the GOP is slamming Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer over his stance on SCOTUS. And last but not least, we'll get into viral discovery with a staff writer for Vox.
But first, the Russian ambassador to the U.S. warned that a threat of nuclear war is very real as tensions mount over ongoing fighting in Ukraine. Moscow's ambassador to Washington, Anatoly Antonov, told Newsweek, quote, "The current generation of NATO politicians clearly does not take the nuclear threat seriously." Following this warning, however, Russian state media reported that Moscow had no intention of using nuclear arms in Ukraine, which Moscow calls a special military operation, effectively shutting down the idea of using nuclear weapons, although it made everybody freak out over the weekend.
Absolutely, yeah. Just last month, top U.S. military leaders accused Russians of nuclear saber rattling after the Russian foreign minister said the nuclear danger is serious, real, and we must not underestimate it. And according to the CIA, Director William Burns, while Putin has been doubling down on the war in Ukraine, there have been no signs of Russia planning to use nuclear weapons. Burns spoke to the Financial Times, saying that while the intelligence community does not see evidence of Russia planning to use nukes, it's still something they don't take lightly. Just yesterday, Russia's space agency said Moscow would be capable of eliminating NATO countries in just 30 minutes in a nuclear war, but added that we will not allow it because the consequences of the exchange of nuclear strikes will affect the state of our Earth. And this is just, horrible stuff to even be contemplating. And it's why, any kind of, even a limited kind of war or military situation is more potentially catastrophic than that. Because even if it's a small, very small chance, and it is a small chance, I think, of escalating to nuclear conflict, like a 0.1% chance of destroying all life on the planet. Like you don't even want to go down that road. So it's just like really scary stuff.
Well, it's just interesting. There's just been a lot of talk about nuclear war with Russia. And of course, we do have to worry about it. They do have a lot of nukes. They have more nukes than we do by about 1,000. I think they have something like 6,500 nuclear warheads, and we have about 5,500 or something along those lines. So it is a very real threat, of the two big nuclear powers going at it with each other. But Russia doesn't really have any motivation right now to use nuclear weapons. There's no reason for them to do it. So even though there's been a lot of discussion and a lot of even our politicians are loosely throwing around the idea that there might be a nuclear war with Russia, even the Russian ambassador to the U.S. kind of saying, oh, well, you've got to take this more seriously. The reality is you have to have a reason to want to use a nuke, and Russia just doesn't have a reason to want to use one. They're despite what Western media has been reporting about Ukraine, saying that the goal of Russia was to take over Ukraine. Russia's never stated that as their goal. It's been to hit military targets, take those military targets out, and then definitely take parts of Ukraine, which they are actually right now successfully doing. It's going to take a while. We're supplying Ukraine with a lot of weapons, so there's a lot of destruction and death going on in the meantime. But they are slowly, albeit, accomplishing their goals. So there's no reason for them. Also, their economy's not being crushed. We are trying a lot by putting a lot of sanctions on them. It's not, I'm talking to people that my contacts in Russia. They're saying that they're not feeling the effects as an average everyday person at this point, that the government has been stepping in, helping them out. One of my contacts over there says that they're actually getting a 20% raise. They work for a Russian bank or the cell phone company. I'm sorry, I forget which one, but they're getting a raise in order to help with the inflation. They said that the government has stepped in and done a lot for them. So there's really there's no uprising going on in Russia right now by the population.
Right.
So there's no pressure to use a nuke. Like, what would be the point?
I agree that there isn't. I don't think there's any serious reason to think if with the confrontation at its current level, there's no real reason to think that they would. If we became more involved, it could be a different story. I think probably I agree with you. They're not really suffering, the economic hardship. They are losing troops, right? They're losing soldiers, and even even losing I mean, think of how, the trickle of lives lost in Afghanistan, for instance, among U.S. troops, right? When we were there, the body count, even at small losses, daily basis, it can sap morale, right? It can. So I think that's probably the most palpable way in which they're feeling the effects. But those are, kind of morale sort of thing, not an economic hardship.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and they're also just at a different place in their development as a country than we are. I mean, we don't have the appetite for that as much. Just where we're at economically, where we're at as a country. Russians, they're coming from a bit of a different space, a harder place, right? They've experienced much more hardship in their recent young lives. I mean, people in their 30s right now remember what it's like to stand in bread lines, they remember what it was like with the collapse of the USSR and then trying to rebuild and it being very stressful on the population. So they're coming from a bit of a different space. I think they have a little bit more tolerance for dying for your country, for the benefit of your country, for the building up of your country than like we do. Because for us, it's, we look at our wars, our endless wars, and we're like, what are we doing? Are we building America? Is this helping us somehow? How is it helping it?
Right.
How is this helping us? Russia might look at this a bit differently, their population. So, but yeah, I don't think
which is a good thing about the U.S. The ability of the U.S. government to engage in to invade other countries is now limited finally by the U.S. people's total lack of interest in doing that and absolute desire to focus on problems at home and not get involved in nation building and not try to solve the problems of the rest of the globe with at the point of a gun. But
if only our politicians would actually listen to us, though, right? They're not following what the people want.
But they're more constrained much more constrained than George W. Bush was in the first half of the aughts. That kind of thing today would not. I don't think it would. I mean, it would if we were attacked, if we were invaded, there would be patriotic fervor to do something about it probably. But the American people in their occasional wisdom, at least, don't want that kind of policy anymore. But somebody who does want that policy for certain is Senator Lindsey Graham, taking a more direct approach with his words, saying the goal of the war in Ukraine should be to take out Putin, adding there is no off-ramp with the Russian president remaining in power. When the invasion initially began back in February, Graham had floated assassinating Putin while on Fox News. And this is when I talk about like the unseriousness of the Republican Party, I'm talking about this. If you're going to pursue, that's not a policy you discuss on television. If assassinating Putin is what they're going to, they would just do that and then deny all responsibility, not talk about how we should do it on freaking television. So obviously that's not something they're doing or planning or should out in the open. And we are not going to accomplish regime change in Russia. I think there's a possibility if this goes on long enough that his own people might replace him with someone else, but that's not something that we are going to accomplish today, tomorrow, next month, or next year.
Well, I don't think assassinating Putin is actually part of the plan. I think Lindsey Graham is just, trying to sound like a strongman, but I do think he's right that the goal of the war is to take out Putin in a way, take out the regime, to change the government of Russia. I think every action the U.S. has made at this point has been not to save Ukraine, not to help the Ukrainian people, but to actually harm Russia, to go after Russia, sanctioning Russia. You're trying to basically turn the people against Putin so that he is somehow ousted from office, trying to bleed out Ukraine, literally, so that the people in Russia, losing soldiers, say, hey, we don't want this special operation, quote unquote, that the government is calling. The people in Russia call it a war, but the government calls it a special operation. So I do think that the goal, I think he's saying the quiet part out loud, saying that the goal of this is not to save Ukraine and to help Ukraine retain their sovereignty or their freedom, but the real goal is to actually harm Russia, to take out Putin, the Putin government. And I think the American people should be livid about this and feel lied to. This is why we're sending over billions of dollars worth of equipment and aid. And we're here suffering in the United States with a collapsing economy, that people not being able to afford their groceries or pay their electric bills or gas prices through the roof. And yet we're supplying endless weapons to Ukraine for what end? for an end that doesn't exist. It's not going to happen. The Russian people love Putin. Whether we like it or not, they do. He's overwhelming. He's way more popular over there than any of our politicians are here in the United States with us Americans. So it's not going to happen. It's a pipe dream, but yet we're funding it. And we're going to continue this on endlessly because of this agenda.
Authoritarian governments can maintain a veneer of popularity, right? Because there's criticism, much greater amounts of criticism are allowed in this country of our government. So there's nothing, we're battling and fighting and arguing and debating policy all the time robustly. It's okay to call the president a moron and a liar and all those things. So there's a lot more acrimony in our political debates because we have a freer society than China or Russia, et cetera. So it's not.
Well, I mean, they can criticize in Russia and in China. They're totally free to do that. There are just limits. They're for sure not as free as we are here. For sure, they do not have as many freedoms when it comes to being able to criticize the government to a certain level, but they absolutely can do it. In China, really the limit is you can't do personal attacks. They don't like personal attacks on the politicians. They say you can criticize the policies. You can't just go after the person.
I mean, you can't search online, right, for criticism of the government.
Well, in China, right, but everybody uses a VPN over there. So it's, it's like a fake facade of this great firewall of China. I mean, look, people, they're definitely not as free, but they're definitely not living in some controlled society that what we think of when we look at like North Korea, for example. It's much more free than that. And they're freely traveling around. I mean, right now, Russians are not freely traveling around the world, but that's because of the West stopping them from doing it. But Russians and Chinese can go everywhere, and especially Chinese right now, and they do go everywhere, and they're free when they go anywhere they go to criticize and say whatever they want, or they move to different countries, they immigrate. It's not that lockdown of an authoritarian country. It is more than ours, but not like so crazy overwhelming.
I mean, I have a very low tolerance for any kind. I mean, I wish we were much more. We are freer than them. Yeah. We're not nearly as free enough. But
and that's totally true.
Yeah,
that's absolutely right.
Well,
but we did have more people show up to Ukraine. We just want to mention this, that the First Lady showed up. She did a surprise visit. So we have more U.S. politicians showing up. We had Nancy Pelosi show up. We also had Antony Blinken and also Lloyd Austin show up. But now the First Lady, she made a surprise visit for Mother's Day to Ukraine to visit with the Ukrainian First Lady. This is Zelensky's wife. And also Justin Trudeau showed up as well. He went to Irpin. He wanted to see the devastation for himself there. So he also made a trip. Although I feel like his trip was overshadowed by the First Lady's trip. So I don't know if he got the press that he was looking for by showing up to Irpin. But
I mean, now there's so many people who've gone. I don't think anybody gets right. It's just it's the endless visit to Ukraine situation. But we haven't. Joe Biden hasn't gone.
No, and I think he should. I think it's good that our politicians and our military leaders are going over there. They need to see what they're doing with our money. I mean, look, if they're going to be spending our money to this level, I guess they should go and see what their money is buying for them. So, by all means, show up, take a look around. I hope then they maybe change their mind and decide maybe they should be facilitating peace negotiations in Ukraine and helping the American people at home here, on our own soil. But, anyway, we've got your radar coming up next, Robby. Looking forward to it.